We're at the site of Cook's Fort, a 1774 frontier fort built by militia and very important in Lord Dunmore's War and then all through the American Revolution. The general location of the fort was passed down through the oral tradition, but to precisely locate it and now to hopefully figure out the structure of the fort, we have turned to geophysical survey and archaeological excavation. We're working in partnership with the Monroe and Summers Counties Historic Landmarks Commission with a grant from the West Virginia Department of Culture and History, and we will have some school students coming out and helping and some public volunteers. The fort was delineated during an earlier geophysical survey, so we think we know where the stockade part of it is at least, and that it is a diamond-shaped fort with two bastions. But to really nail down these details of its construction, we'll need to turn to hand excavation, which we'll be doing throughout this week. We have already found a number of artifacts from metal detecting and think that we may be able to pinpoint some activity areas within the fort. And we're hopeful that we're going to learn, well, just a tremendous amount during the coming week.
But you can clearly see the four walls of the fort here, here, and this one's not, the west side's not so clear. This is a ditch here, a drainage. It was a natural drainage, but it's been filled in, and the little black and white spikes here, that's metal. There's a lot of trash and probably some drain pipe in here. But a small test trench here indicated the location, verified that that is indeed the stockade wall. It looks like there might be a little bastion in this corner and in this corner. So excavations this coming week will test those two areas.
The south corner of the fort was located by hand excavation based on the remote sensing and GPS data. A small track hoe excavated the rest of the stockade, including the west bastion, which was partially destroyed by drainage construction during the 1930s. The stockade trench was scraped off by archaeologists. And here the east bastion is sprayed to increase visibility for photography and mapping. Sections of the stockade trench were excavated, mapped, and photographed. This photograph shows the profile of a post mold from a stockade log. Cook's Fort was mapped using a transit and GPS. The site map shows the fort, excavation units, and metal detector finds. The aerial photo shows the excavated fort. A trash midden was discovered just outside the stockade.
Animal bones left over from cooking tell us about an important aspect of life in the fort, the food. The dense concentration of bones from this refuse pit includes remains of swine, cattle, deer, black bear, raccoon, wild turkey, and fish.
We're standing here at the east bastion of Cook's Fort. We first did a magnetometer survey here, which showed a pretty good evidence of where the fort was. And then we brought out a small track hoe and followed the stockades around, which we'd first uncovered by hand. And the fort turned out to be 80 to 82 feet square with two opposite corner bastions, one here on the east side and the other on the west. The other two corners were basically just right angles of the stockade trench. And the trench is basically a dug feature in which they placed log poles and then backfilled it. And as over time the logs rotted or were pulled out, we find a trench with a central dark stain with post molds in it.
Well, it's been 10 days of excavation at Cook's Fort on Indian Creek, and we have learned so much. I'm standing in the bastion, and this was a defensive position at one of the 4 corners of the fort. Through our geophysical survey, we had located an area that we thought contained the stockade, but now this excavation has verified it. And we're exposing the whole stockade, and we've excavated several trenches to learn about how the posts were set into it. We've also used the distribution of artifacts that we're finding, mostly through metal detecting, but also through screen shovel testing, to try and figure out activity areas in the fort and to look for places where it would be fruitful to open up larger excavation units. In doing this, we have found a tremendous refuse feature that the fort inhabitants created just outside the wall of the stockade. They dug a pit and threw a lot of their trash into it. And so we have in that pit preserved lots of animal bones that will tell us about their diet, hopefully seeds that will help us also learn about the diet, a better collection of artifacts. We have gun flints and a little bit of bottle glass, even a couple pieces of ceramics. We're finding that in general the fort was kept pretty clean. There are artifacts in the interior, but there's not a high density, and it appears that maybe they were even sweeping the fort. There's a lot of animal bone up against the stockade walls. So we're beginning to learn about life in the fort, as well as one of our basic questions of what was the structure of this fort. And now we know it was a very classic design, a square fort with bastions on opposing corners, on 2 of the corners. So this would have given them a good defensive position. Probably they utilized the entire area around the fort, that they would have cleared of trees and just come into this pretty small stockaded area in times of extreme danger. But there's much more that can be learned here, so after 10 days we have a good start and we have ideas about what could be done in the future. So we hope the local inhabitants enjoy the presentations we're going to do, some museum exhibits. We've had a number of local volunteers, some high school students from James Monroe High School and other surrounding schools have come out, and a number of private citizens. So we're really happy to share this history with everyone.
Use charcoal as an indicator, but not out of it yet. You might be getting close though. I'll give you my